hopefully we'll see some light very soon. I've written most of the manuscript, so I'm excited about that to work in a different market and try to get some younger people involved. Beyond that, the books I'm writing are a trilogy, and my proposal to do is end it after the 1948 World Series win. So we'd be going from 1920 to 1948, hopefully to pick up the team in 42 in the war years and see what they were up to then and all the difficulties they had keeping the game going. And then after the war, players coming back, and we have Feller coming back and the others, and building a new ownership with Bill Veeck, and ultimately getting to the top in 1948. So that's what I'm looking for in the next couple of years. As far as the Indians, I know I'm eternally optimistic, so you can take it with a grain of salt. But I think they have the pitching, and that should be enough to win the division. I think Minnesota might challenge because they really loaded up the lineup, but I think the Indians can do that. And I think my take has been, I'm probably in the minority, maybe people haven't thought, but I think the Indians are going into the season to see how things are, and I really believe before the trading deadline they're going to make a big move to whatever it's going to take to get to the World Series, be it they have to get rid of a pitcher or get some help in the outfield, rent a guy for 3 months. But I think that's what they're looking to do, because I think the front office is believing we can win the division, but what's it going to take to get to the World Series? And they're going to figure it out by May and June, and they're going to make a move before the trading deadline. We're going to see some player well above what we're normally used to, but I shouldn't use those words because we have Lindor and Ramirez and others, but a real high-quality outfield or something like that for a rental, or maybe to a contract, and I think that's where they're headed. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I guess I should say that I expect them to win the division, and I expect them to play for a shot in the World Series. They got to take Boston out or New York or Houston, but I'm hoping this year they will, and they'll get back there.
I keep telling people, don't get too attached to Kluber or Carrasco, because if the Indians are going to make a run, that's probably the place they're going to have to go. And you've nailed it, in my opinion. That outfield basically has me, you, and my 4-year-old son in terms of hitting, right? They just need hitting out there. So I think that's probably the right call.
I think they're going to do it. And I also think, too, that the pitching that they have guys that could fill in, I think. The Anderson's supposedly healthy, and the guy from AA, I think McKenzie, who's been outstanding, and Bieber and Plutko. I think they could make a fifth starter out of one of those guys. So if they have to deal Kluber or Carrasco or Bauer, I think they can still have enough firepower to get them where they need to go. And by dealing one of those guys for a super outfielder, I think they could be on their path. And I'm hoping that's what the management has in mind. I'm not a mind reader, but I'm guessing that's what they're thinking, and to do it in June when the time's right, and then we'll see what we got.
Well, not only an expert and a great writer of the history of the Cleveland Indians, you clearly know the current Indians' trouble and situation as well, and we can't thank you enough for joining us, Scott. We were joined by Scott Longert, author of Bad Boys and Bad Times. Please get a copy of his book. Scott, thank you for so much time today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, John, anytime. Thanks for giving me the time.
Cinderblock Sports isn't your weekly recap. It's about host John O'Donnell's view on the week in sports, including interviews with interesting personalities, John's opinions on topics that you may have missed, and entertainment through analysis of the sports we love. Now, from the Dream Big Studios, here's John O'Donnell.
And welcome back to Cinderblock Sports. I am your host, John O'Donnell. We are here at the Dream Big Studios in Akron, Ohio. Please find us on Facebook at Cinderblock Sports. Our Twitter is at Cinder Sports. And our email is cinderblocksports@gmail.com. Please, if you get a chance, give us a review, a mention, a like, a favorite. We need them all. And thanks for listening. We want to thank Scott Longert for joining us to discuss his book, Bad Boys and Bad Times. It's a chronicle of the 1936 to 1941 Cleveland Indians. It is a great read, and I want you all to get out and see Scott at some of his book signings coming up. He'll be at the Learned Owl in Hudson on the afternoon of March 16th, so before you go get that green beer and you tune up those green eggs and you got that ham, you're going to have a nice book to read during the hangover. That is sure to follow. So March 16th, Learned Owl, Hudson. March 23rd, he will be at the Wahoo Luncheon at the Hilton Garden Inn in Fair Lawn, Ohio. And at the end of the month, March 29th through the 31st, Scott will be at the Ohio Sports Collector Convention in Strongsville, Ohio at the Holiday Inn. So please get out there, see him. He is an amazing guy in terms of the history of baseball and the Cleveland Indians in particular. And Scott and I, we talked at length off the air, and one topic that came up was how cheating is part of the string of history that makes up baseball. As Scott explained in the interview, the Indians actually cheated to acquire and retain the rights to Bob Feller, who, by Scott's accounts, and by many accounts, is the best player the Indians have ever had. Of course, the kind of manipulation with records and false reporting to different teams and different locations just wouldn't happen in the Big Brother era we live in now. But it's an example of how rampant cheating has been in baseball. Not that sports statistics are wholly fungible with crime statistics, but it's common sense, and statistics tell you that whenever crime you know about, you know only a percentage of what is occurring. If the police stop you for speeding once, chances are you've sped 20, 30, 40, 3,000 times, right? Now, obviously, the bigger the crime, the more likely you are to be discovered doing it. If you murder 12 people, chances are you're going to get found out. But for smaller crimes, like speeding, or to relate it to baseball, to take amphetamines to get through the grind of a baseball season, those small crimes are likely to not get caught. Those small instances of cheating. It's the same with cheating in baseball. We knew of certain events, we know of certain cheating scandals, but there's probably a whole lot more of actual cheating going on. And the timeline of the scandals that we know about connects the errors of the sport. Start in 1919, 100 years ago. As many as 8 players of the Chicago White Sox were accused of throwing the World Series to benefit gamblers. This followed 2 years of questionable betting and payouts in the 1917 and the 1918 World Series. The Black Sox scandal resulted in big changes in baseball's connection to betting. Baseball used to lend its players a lot to casinos, to sports books, to horse racing tracks. Well, those connections with those players obviously was part or a big part of the cheating scandals themselves. That scandal involving the White Sox was turned into a movie, 8 Men Out. And to this day, if you are a baseball fan, you probably have heard the stories or you know of the cheating that has occurred in the Black Sox scandal. And that was 100 years ago. Look at Pete Rose. Pete Rose is an example of the tip of the iceberg theory to me. The get caught speeding once, but probably we're speeding 100 times theory. Pete probably wasn't the only person in baseball betting on baseball or on his team, as baseball had alleged. And we don't know to this day exactly how much Pete Rose bet on baseball and how much he bet for, and hopefully not, but maybe against the Cincinnati Reds. And this was the all-time hit leader in baseball who accepted a lifetime ban for allegedly betting on baseball and or the Cincinnati Reds. I am of the opinion that Pete Rose has to be in the Hall of Fame. He revolutionized the way hitting was done. And he should be there, but he accepted a lifetime ban because of the mounting evidence of his gambling, of his cheating on the game. Now, on-field cheating has gone on forever as well. Players have scuffed balls with nail files or with sandpaper. Pitchers are putting Vaseline or other compounds on their hats or their arms or other body parts to doctor a ball, to alter a ball, and create more effects on their pitches. And it's not like the public loses their mind because players are cheating. Rather, the cheating itself usually becomes a punchline. Look at the Negro brothers. The Negroes were folk heroes for trying to, and presumably getting away with, doctoring a lot of pitches. They got caught. But I'm sure they got away with a lot more than they got caught with. It was accepted that these guys and other players would try to cheat to get that advantage, and that it was the umpire's job and responsibility to catch them. that it was a game of cat and mouse. It wasn't looked at as taboo. It was looked at as part of the game. The cheating itself got a shrug of the shoulders when it was caught. Kind of a wry smile. We got you this time, kind of thing. And batters were doing the same thing. They were combating pitchers by hollowing out their bats, using too much pine tar, and things of that nature. Two of these incidents are famous. If you're too young to remember George Brett losing his tiny little mind after being ejected for too much pine tar against the Yankees, please find a YouTube or 8mm film of that insanity. Again, though, what people talk about is the reaction, the crazy eyes, the I got caught and I'm going to absolutely go postal. Not the cheating itself, not that George Brett had probably put too much pine tar on that bat for 20, 30, 40 games that year, who knows. And Sammy Sosa, oh, Sammy Sosa, before he forgot to speak the English language in front of Congress, his bat exploded one summer, and rubber balls bounced all over the field like somebody broke one of those games in an old grocery store. Kids should have been running all over the field to catch their souvenirs that day. Sammy's explanation? It was a practice bat, a home run derby bat. Notwithstanding, no one lost their minds over that doctored bat. Rather, we and me and just about everybody else make jokes about the rubber balls bouncing all over the field and kind of smile and say, oh, that crazy Sammy Sosa. And who can forget the Cleveland Indians story where a relief pitcher allegedly climbed through the roof of the dugout in Jacobs Field and stole the bat of Albert Bell from the umpire's locker room to prevent it from being found out to be corked, meaning the bat was hollowed out and replaced with cork instead of wood. These moments are unique to baseball. They are. The accepted cheating, the folk hero nature of the cheaters, the campfire nature of the stories. And of course, like legends and fishing and high school football for those who played, they grow in nature. They get bigger. They get retold. The story of Paul Bunyan, who was probably actually 3'10" and carried a mallet, not 6'8", carrying a huge axe. These stories just grow with time. But they're the connections of the game. They're the connections that create the bonds of history of baseball fans. It's been a reason that baseball has been passed as America's pastime for over 100 years. Dads and granddads and moms and grandmas can share these stories of cheating and share the stories of the game itself as well. But these salacious stories, these connections to fixing the World Series, to hitting home runs with a bat that has rubber balls in it, these are the stories that connect with young fans and make them connect to the game even more. I've talked about fandom as being formed in part by the experience we share as fans, we experience as fans. That's true even now, as the other traditional bonds of fandom, geography and community, become changed or eliminated by technology. Experiences still matter. And unlike the other major American sports that rely mainly on experience a game live, in person, or maybe in front of a TV, baseball experiences are generally more nuanced and have a much deeper history. For me, this hits personally, and it's part of the fondest memories I have of my grandma, who was a major part of my life growing up. As a young man, my grandma watched me a lot. And one thing I learned was that I could stay up past my bedtime if, and only if, I wanted to watch baseball with her. Back then we had limited viewing options, so the primetime baseball games were typically good ones. The Cardinals, the Yankees, or other nationally relevant teams. Or, during the fall, it was the playoffs, the World Series. Either way, it was generally meaningful baseball with some of the stars of the game. Well, of course, I told my grandma that baseball was my jam. And I was so happy to be able to watch it. In reality, I could care less about the game of baseball at that time. However, I got to spend time with my grandma learning the game. She would teach me why people bunted, why God was okay with Ricky Henderson stealing second base, but he wasn't so good with me stealing a transformer from the local Walmart, but also how the game worked. how a double play was turned,